If you give it the right size task, the right constraints, tell it what you really want, you can get magic out of these things.
The exact way in which you decide to ask the question deeply influences the answer.
I completely changed everything I did about my code base and all of my cursor rules files and all my agent MDs after seeing how messy of an internal world that coding agents were getting.
Plans are worthless, but planning is essential.
Prompting is the fundamental unit of the way that you interact with AI. I know it's a subset of context engineering and there's other important things to take into account, but the vast majority of interactions with AI will be through prompts. And as models have evolved, improved, so does the way we need to prompt them. You don't have to ask it to think through step by step, or you'll reward it $200 for a good job anymore. So in episode 57 of Tool Use, brought to you by ToolHive, I brought in two guests to share their advanced prompting techniques and to discuss meta prompting. We have Michael Tiffany, the founder and CEO of Fulcra, and Ty Fiero, an AI consultant. So I hope you enjoy this episode on advanced prompting techniques.
People are starting to use like bigger prompts, at least from like some people I talked to at AI Tinkerers. It seems like they're starting to use like multiple page prompts, which is kind of crazy to me. I feel like I'm more of a prompt purist. I kind of like things as pure as possible, but it seems like people like these larger prompts, and so I'm confused by that. But yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of, seems like, you don't remember like a year ago when people were like, wow, man, the models are going to get smarter and prompting's just not going to matter anymore. And you're just going to be able to say what you want. You're just going to get what you want. I think it's been the opposite, where I think prompts are more important than ever now, especially with GPT-5, where like if you prompt that thing incorrectly, if you say the wrong sentence or even misspell a word, it just does not give you the right results. And so I feel like prompting is more important than it ever has been, is my hot take of the day. But I'm really curious to hear how you guys have been prompting.
I've noticed a sharp divide in the outputs that my friends get out of AI models, where a small minority of people get great outputs, and in the majority, even of my smart, technically capable friends, on average, they're getting, I think, bad outputs. And I've been just getting obsessed with this social divide. I think it's a fascinating kind of emergent phenomenon.
Yeah, I still recommend people to keep the tight, narrow prompts, but like Ty was saying, it does seem to be drifting away to larger prompts. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I've been noticing is a pretty consistent trend is before we were capable of having really like model agnostic systems where you can just kind of immediately change from the OpenAI model to the Anthropic model with the exact same prompt and, be able to compare the outputs. But now they diverge so much where you really have to tailor the prompt to the model that it's getting a lot more difficult to build like a prompt library where you can just like copy paste it in and just expect similar results across the models, because all of them have their own little like quirks. And I haven't figured out like which quirk is best with which model yet.
Right. Well, I like the idea. I think the idea of prompt libraries puts you in a frame of mind that I think is still really helpful, which is thinking of prompts as little programs that chart a course across latent space and produce a certain output. And I think that's still a useful way to approach interaction with AI models. I'll add that as I play around with different models, an important strategy of mine is to take advantage of the asymmetry between generating and discriminating, to take the output from one model and just copy the whole thing over to some other model and ask for, criticism, which continues to be great. I think that asymmetry was first noticed, not even with LLMs, but actually with GANs, right? And it makes sense. The discriminator generator asymmetry especially makes sense in the case of GANs, just to kind of cue your intuition here, because it's obviously easier to tell good from bad than it is to generate good, right? So that asymmetry emerged years ago. We still see it in LLMs. Sometimes I now see this termed as like the evaluation versus generation gap, which is a little kinder to LLMs. But you see it every single time you you basically copy from one and engage another specifically as the critic, that this almost always improves outputs. So like lean into that, right? That as long as this asymmetry exists, we as users can take advantage of it. And that's principally how I take advantage of it. It's just to see what Grok thinks about this Gemini output or what have you.
Yeah, I incorporate that onto my cursor workflow where I'll be having a chat with GPT-5, just being like, create a plan for this, leave it on pro so it's thinking for like 5 minutes. Meanwhile, working with Opus 4.1 to do some actual work, and then it'll propose something. I'm like, what do you think about this alternative? Pull it in. I still worry about the sycophancy where it's like, oh, that's a brilliant idea. We should go down that route. So I'm always a little bit skeptical when I take in an output from model A, give it to model B, and model B is like, you're right, let's do that instead. So I wish there was a more reliable way to say, like, accurately and unbiasedly gauge your suggestion versus this other suggestion.
Right.
And I know we're trending towards that way. I just haven't found a foolproof way yet.
Okay, well, I'm going to take this as a segue to share like the Michael Tiffany grand unified theory of who is good at AI models and who is bad. And it comes down to pure attitude. Specifically, the difference is who you give agency to when you interact with an AI model. The anti-pattern that I see most often is to assign agency to the model, often by personifying it. So you treat ChatGPT like it's some extremely well-informed person. Like it is this singular entity that has been trained on the entire internet, and you want a question answered or you want to give it a task. So you give the question and then you receive an answer from this extremely well-informed thing. And you see this conversationally where people will say, well, I asked ChatGPT about blah, 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 and it said this, right? That's assigning agency to the model. It's like as you would assign agency to like a very wise person, right? I climbed up the mountain, I asked the guru the thing, and this is what he said. And when you're thinking like that, then naturally you would think that the guru will answer the same question the same way over and over. And AI models are not like that at all. There's a temperature slider. You just move the slider and you get a completely different output, right? This is not a singular, well-informed person. And sycophancy is like your clue that you have the agency. The exact way in which you decide to ask the question deeply influences the answer, right? And so when you assign yourself the agency in the relationship, and so you rather think like, what is the input that gets, that like starts the traversal across latent space that will get me the output that I want, then I think you're on the right footing. And all of the most masterful users of AI models are doing that. They're assigning themselves the agency for the output. And they're iterating on their prompts in order to get the output that they want, right? Like it's a high agency attitude more than a particular technical skill that I think makes the difference.
I think what's also really interesting too is I've noticed like seeing my non-techie friends try to prompt, like especially into ChatGPT, you just like, you hear them give their bias in the prompt so heavily. And then this thing like is sycophant back to them. It's like, well, duh. It's like, I don't know, like my wife will ask something to it where, I don't know, she's looking for a recipe. She's just like, I just don't think this recipe is going to work because I don't think it's going to be very tasty, but I'm not sure. What do you think? Of course it's going to be like, well, of course that's not going to be very, And so it's like,
you're absolutely right.
Right. I mean, so I have to be very careful when I prompt to like try to keep things as neutral as possible to some extent, because if I show some sort of bias in a particular direction, it's like, ooh, I can make him happy by going in that direction. And it's like, that's not what I want. What I want is to put all the options on the table and then to like kind of have it process them and like make its own sort of decisions on it. So I've kind of used this as like a kind of a weird story, but when me and my wife have like I don't know, there's something that happens at home and we need to ask ChatGPT, and I have an answer that I want out of ChatGPT, and she has an answer that she wants out of ChatGPT, It's all about the way you prompt it, right? I have to prompt it so it sounds to her like I'm asking a genuine question to ChatGPT, but just a little bit of bias, and all of a sudden this thing's like, you know what? I think we should do that. And I'm like, so a random side project, but it's definitely like you have to watch what you say to these things because any
Right.
little bit of directionality towards the thing that you want to do, and it's like, I'm going to find a way to get you that thing. At least what I've seen in GPT-5 and ChatGPT recently.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Dexter Horthy recently gave a talk on like advanced context engineering, and his whole thing was as soon as you see the output, say you're absolutely right, like restart. You're going down the wrong path.
Yes.
It's clearly been prompted in the wrong way. In terms of that, like trying to reduce bias, do you find anything like asking it to play devil's advocate or trying to intentionally frame it in a way where it will explore both options gives balance, or does that not really address the problem?
Oh, that's such a great question. With the specifically what I am doing is iterative prompting. That's such a great question. With the specifically what I am doing, trying to build one great prompt that gets a model to think through the gaps of its own reasoning, I will set task A, I'll get a first draft about something that I'm interested in that's fact-based, right? That could be a matter of history or could be, some matter of science or math. And then with that output, then I engage the critic. I'm like, okay, and here's an interesting heuristic that I think is worth sharing. I love to indulge the model's enthusiasm for ranking. So instead of saying, find the gaps in this argument, you say, what are the weakest points in this argument? Order from weakest to least weak, right? Something along those lines. And that I get better output when I ask for superlatives like that. What are the weakest points? What are the strongest points? As opposed to like gap analysis. Though I'll also try gap analysis, just like in this 5-point argument, what are the missing steps that are secretly there? Things like that, and that iteration produces much better reasoning.
One issue, just in terms of the ranking, that I've noticed it's not good at is when you say assign a numerical value to it. But one way of trying to circumvent that, and I've had mixed results, it feels promising, but I don't have enough confidence yet, is giving it a grading rubric. So for example, if I'm trying to say like, rate this argument 1 through 4, I'll actually say like 1, like incoherent, 2, decent, 3, good, 4, like perfect or something like that. And I found associating a word to a number kind of helps, but because of my bias being like, I've seen it go like, pick number 7 or number 4 for everything. I don't totally trust it, but Ty or Michael, do you have any like suggestions if you're trying to say like grade or like rank in a numerical way, or do you just say like weakest to strongest?
I don't know if this is helpful, but I've noticed that all the eval platforms out there like require you to return a numeric value out so that it can actually give a number. And I'm like, we talked on tool use like months ago, Mike, that like these models aren't very good at that. And so I had a very simple solution where it's like, I want the eval to be an all natural language. And so like, I'm going to ask it what it really thinks, and it can give me a couple paragraphs if it wants to on what the actual output is. And then you just add another step to it that's like, okay, take this output, and was this a number? Like if you had to rank what this response was to the question from 0 to 10, what would it be? And so it's less of there's just like an extra step. So you actually kind of let it like answer in a way that it would to a normal human. And then you have something grade that output as the number. I don't know if that's helpful, or I actually don't know if that works, but I think it's a clever way of trying to go about that. But I'm curious what you think, Michael.
I have also ended up in a place where I want to do as little, let's call it format translation as possible. I've noticed every format translation seems to be cognitively costly and will therefore come at the expense of really sound reasoning. For instance, I sometimes run into people who recommend prompting with structure, like heavyweight structure, like JSON, and that does not work well for me at all. Like certainly you can get models to output JSON. But that seems to come at the cost of lower quality output. So I pretty much stay in Markdown all the time. Like that seems to be the lowest. It is almost like the native language of the frontier models. I've noticed that GPT-5 wants to solve problems with code so often that one time recently, I was designing for myself a little meditation practice program. So I want to get good at this kind of esoteric thing. So I was like coming up with a stepwise plan. And seriously, I'm engaging in English, and GPT-5 in its recommendation of that stepwise plan just decides that the best way to communicate how I should do my meditation is in pseudocode, which is adorable. Like, I really think that this is just sort of classic overfitting, right? Like, the OpenAI really wants GPT-5 to be a good coding model, and so has overtrained it to the point where it tries to solve even kind of non-coding problems with a little bit of pseudocode. But I just find this charming.
Yeah. While stressed, do deep breathing.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's also been interesting to see the like difference between Anthropic and OpenAI's like prompting techniques. Because like you look at some of like OpenAI's prompts and like kind of what they recommend, and even their little prompt optimizer tool on the platform, like you never ever see an XML tag, which is crazy. But I mean, that's just the way OpenAI does things, and that's, I would imagine, how they're training these things, right? Like not through XML. But then you look at Anthropic's and use their prompt optimization tool, and everything's XML. And you hear the traditional advice of like, we'll use XML tags for prompting, which I think is not necessarily bad advice to like group related things together and like kind of like add. But I think the OpenAI way of doing things is to just like add a hashtag, add an H1 tag, and then group everything underneath a header, and then have a header, and then I think that's actually where things are headed more so than XML. And so I've actually stopped entirely using XML, and I'm primarily using OpenAI models. But I think forcing an OpenAI model to use all XML is putting it into a different like headspace than say a Claude model would be. So I, like you said earlier, Mike, it's like so tough to write one prompt for multiple models now. And it's like, I think it's only getting tougher, and seems like Claude is doubling down on XML tags, and OpenAI is certainly not.
Yeah, now that you've mentioned it, another one of my little heuristics is when I iterate in a single conversation, because I didn't like the output that I got at first, and I'm just working the problem until I get something that I like. Then I just have this regular practice, which is to ask the model something along the lines of, I really liked this output. What could I have put in my initial prompt that would have taken me straight to this output? And that is a highly, let's call it individualistic sort of prompt, right? So the way Claude will coach you to one-shot something is significantly different than the way that ChatGPT or Gemini or Grok will. And yeah, what I have to do is I'm just kind of holding it in my head, right? So it's like how you learn to talk to different friends differently, So notwithstanding all my copy pasting, which can sometimes give me great results, I still have to kind of like remember, some people will have like girlfriend voice, right? So I'm like, yep, I got to talk to Claude with Claude voice. And that's totally different than ChatGPT voice.
I've done something similar where I take an output, a prompt, get a certain output, don't like it, ask it to try to change it. But I've never actually done it in a programmatic way where something along the same lines of like chain of thought, but chaining multiple prompts together to try to say, this is what I want. For this given prompt, this is the type of output I want. Give me a better prompt, and then taking that prompt to feed it in. Have either of you done a pipeline like that where you have like a prompt optimization step automatically in the workflow?
I started doing this all the time with specifically ChatGPT deep research, because the time cost of deep research is so high that I wanted to take the variance out, right? So in my ChatGPT history, there's so much meta prompting that's me working with the non-deep research model to come up with really great like kitchen sink prompts to then send on a deep research job to like work away for 10 minutes. Yeah. I highly recommend this. Oh my God. That that has led to one, better prompting on my part, and then two, I think great gap analysis in my own thinking, right? So the iterative prompt techniques like this ideally generate questions, right? So you find that in effect, the model is pointing out a gap in your prompt, which is expressed in the form of a question. And then you got to think, oh yeah, what do I want? Right. Yeah. So it's nice to sort of engage in a dialogue whose, which will be almost like a gap analysis on your own thinking. And you want that to go fast. And then the final payload isn't even the output you want. The final payload is actually the prompt to then send to a thinking model or a research model to go spend a bunch of time on.
I think that's fundamentally the best prompting advice you could give anyone that doesn't prompt very often, is just like, know what you want out of it and work backwards from that. Because I feel like so many prompts are just like kind of like a Hail Mary throw of like, what's the best keyboard under $100 for this? And it's like, well, what do you actually want here? You know, like, what do you actually want? Because you need to be able to codify what you want in a way that a model can understand to get the results that you're actually looking for. Because I feel like if you're just going in there and just prompting willy-nilly, you're not going to get what you're looking for. But starting from, it's kind of like how you build good evals, is like, what does the definition of good look like? What does the perfect response look like? And almost like meta prompting yourself to figure out how you would get that sort of response out of the model. I feel like that's such an, I do that practice frequently when I'm talking to ChatGPT. I'm trying to think about what I want out of this thing and how do I get it there. And that practice to me, I think it just made me a better prompt engineer. And I haven't it's not something I write down. It's not something I really do, but it's something I just kind of go to ChatGPT and I think about what I want out of it and I try to make the prompt for it. But just know what you want, people. I think that's so important. I don't think enough people actually know what they want out of the model.
Totally. Yeah. And I often just start with, help me think through my decision about XYZ. So I don't start the conversation in a way that looks like it's a meta prompting exercise. I really am asking for help. And then my final request will be, great, generate me a prompt incorporating all of the above that I can, use with deep research or something like that. I get a kick-ass output and start a new chat with that from scratch.
A lot of these prompting techniques are vital for getting AI to do real work for you. And when you get the right prompt, you want to make sure you augment it with your real data and systems using MCP. So that's why I've been using ToolHive. ToolHive makes it simple and secure to use MCP. It includes a registry of trusted MCP servers. It lets me containerize any server with a single command. I can install a client in seconds, and secret protection and network isolation are built in. You can try ToolHive too. It's free and it's open source, and you can learn more at toolhive.dev. Now back to the conversation with Michael and Ty.
One thing that's kind of struck me is both of you use it so frequently that you have this intuition. Do either of you see any shortcuts or techniques, best practices for people who don't have the time or experience to have naturally built this intuition to kind of like leapfrog ahead? Is there anything you can do as a thought experiment or some type of like homework someone could take, where instead of spending the 3 years we've been working with LLMs and try to condense it into something where they can build up a skill set quite quickly so they can get to this point of knowing how to frame their prompts in a productive way?
Oh, for me, it's about playing. I must say, I feel like a child and I'm doing a bunch of open-ended play with no destination involved, right? Like I'm just playing with these things. And that is the skill building. So then when I'm at work or when I'm being super goal directed, then I have this like basket of skills to draw upon, but I'm not even being very purposeful about that skill building. I'm actually just following my curiosity. And I think that lowers the cost of the skill building, right? It's just, if you're in the play mindset, then you're having fun and you just happen to be learning while playing.
I feel like it's one of those things that just takes deliberate practice. You just really have to get, like you're saying, you have to go play with these things. I think we've talked about this a lot before, Mike, but just like you have to have the curiosity. Like, can you foster some amount of curiosity in like how you can become a better prompter and actually deliberately practice? That said, not everyone has the time to do that. I think maybe a simple version that you could try is just try to write your own meta prompt. Like just, I don't know. I have this very simple automation I have on my computer that I've noticed with GPT-5, and it kind of breaks my heart that it is not very good with like brain dump, like word vomit from audio prompts. It really does not like that very much. I know it breaks my heart, man, because I spend all day talking to my computer. So, and it's gotten to the point I use all Codex CLI now, not Claude Code at all. And I have to write a good prompt for it. Yet I don't want to sit there and type forever, so I'll word vomit to it. But I've made my own little like hotkey that I hit a hotkey, and then kind of like Plunk that we interviewed back in the day, Mike, where it's just like takes my prompt, chews on it, and then just spits out something that's more structured. And it's very simple of just like take the general vibe here and kind of just structure it in a way that avoids a lot of the filler words and tries to like assume different spellings and things like that. And then it makes something a little bit more structured. I still have to review it a little bit, but generally what I'm trying to say here is like if you didn't have the time to learn through all of this, you could try to make just maybe some sort of meta prompt that you could kind of like what you've been doing, Michael, just in ChatGPT, trying to kind of have a prompt that you can apply to other prompts to just make things a little bit better. That's kind of the shortcut, but really to good prompting, there is no shortcut. You just got to practice and you got to play.
Right. Shortly after the memory features were rolled out in ChatGPT, I did some exploration about how this was actually dumped into the context window of new chats. And that exposed to me that there's now a whole section of the context window for every new chat that you start with ChatGPT called user interaction metadata. And in user interaction metadata, so this means it's in the context of the model in every new chat. There's something about what kind of computer you're using. Like, are you using the native ChatGPT app? Or are you coming in on a web browser, et cetera? There's some metadata about like how long you've had an account. There's a bunch of user data. And then there are these statistics that are about how you have been using ChatGPT, like average conversation depth, some interesting stats on like the length of your average prompts. And so if you are hearing this and you were curious about the sort of play that I'm talking about that also ends up shaping your intuition for how to play with these models, try playing around with a prompt that is not jailbreaking. You're not asking for anything out of the protected system prompt, but try to get it to show you the contents of your own user interaction metadata, and then just ask follow-up questions about what you learn about yourself. It's great.
We also noticed you can ask for you can just ask for memories. That it's like, what are all the memories that you have access to? I'm just curious what's like front of mind for you when you start to talk to me. And I did that just a couple of months ago, and it spit out just this giant list of all of these like memories, which were all like true, but some of them just didn't matter anymore. And so I asked it, okay, based on all of these memories that you've given me here, like which ones are the most helpful and which ones are the most useless? Like which ones do you wish you could forget? And it gave me a list of the good ones, and it gave me a list of the bad ones. And truthfully, I don't know if this worked or not. I have no idea. But I just asked, okay, can you go and forget those ones that you don't want anymore? Because I feel like we don't need those. And I don't know if it worked or not, but I feel like it did, because those didn't come back in future conversations.
Oh, nice.
I feel like this kind of like meta interacting with ChatGPT to figure out exactly what it is. I feel like just good at ChatGPT advice too is to just like have a couple conversations, not on like what you need in that moment, but to just like prime future conversations of like, I'm just going to go talk to ChatGPT and tell it who I am and what I want to be and who I care about. And like, just give it some of this information to seed its little memory bank. And
right.
I feel like that's been helpful for me.
Nice.
Just on the notes of what's included in the context, I was actually quite disappointed to find out Claude Code does something similar, where on the prompt that it adds to go along with Claude MD, it actually states the information in Claude MD may or may not be helpful. And in my mind, introducing ambiguity from the get-go is just like a recipe for disaster. And I've started dual wielding Claude Code and Codex.
Nice.
I still want to play with AMP a bit more. Open code is an option. There's a lot more going on, but there's
Right.
something about using a product and having your prompt augmented in a way that's hidden from the user, and it can manipulate the output in a certain way that I'm not a
Right.
huge fan of. I really want that granular control, but I realize I'm not like the average user, and sometimes they need the extra assistance, extra guidance to try to get to the best output for their given prompts.
Mhm.
But it was quite disappointing to find out. I'd like to pivot slightly. I think it was GitHub recently released a project on spec-driven development, where it's trying to take coding and transition away from write the code first, build it out that way to develop a very strong spec. And I feel like this is very tightly intertwined with advanced prompting because they're trying to structure in a way where you can give everything you need ahead of time.
Right.
When you're going about a project, or whether it's like a coding project or even just, a general query, do you have any advice for how people should think about either like a checklist or a structure to make sure that they kind of check all the boxes that their thinking is complete? Or is it so
Right.
varied that there's no real like silver bullet and it's just back to the practice and developing the intuition?
I really want to jump in here because this is a question near and dear to my heart. I am a hacker first and foremost, and then a software engineer secondarily. And I'll just put it this way. I think most managers in software development, like if you consider the entire population of people who have power in software development projects, like most of them are bozos who do not understand their own field. That I cannot believe the bozo density of software engineering management. And the a central truth of software development is that big software projects, and up to and including your small software project that takes advantage of big ones, are the most complicated structures that humanity has ever produced, full of literal chaos, full of emergent phenomena that are emergent phenomena, like the weather, right? So yes, all software can be expressed in terms of simple streams of bytes, but the behavior of our software systems is absolutely non-deterministic. It follows the same kind of chaos theory as the weather. If you are in denial about this fact, then you believe that the cost overruns and delays in software projects are entirely because of like under preparation. Like, oh, we just didn't write the requirements document like hard enough. Oh, we didn't write enough like test cases, which is just bonkers, just absolute insanity. And so the fundamental conceit of waterfall engineering planning is that somehow software is this like highly deterministic system, and you can simply plan all of the variants out, and this myth just will not die. It's unbelievable. And part of the reason why it will not die is that you really do get better results if with a certain amount of specification, not least because it is hard to know what you want. There's a bunch of what you want that's actually tacit. And so if you're forced by questions to really kind of dig deep and figure out like, oh yeah, I didn't think hard enough about how I want the software to do, to zig right here instead of zag. It's like, it is important to pull those hidden requirements out of the minds of whoever has them. And so perhaps this is the software way of reiterating, I think, Eisenhower's quip that plans are worthless, but planning is essential. That there is something great about that, like planning process, but it can never actually achieve zero variance. So if you have that hacker mindset that software is this complex adaptive system that's going to be full of weird little back alleys of behavior because it needs to interface with reality, and the number of inputs available from reality is literally infinite, so you cannot catch all exceptions, then you sometimes just have to do things, and then you see how it breaks. And like the process of creation is 100% purely experimental. So the apparent success of vibe coding to produce something that appears on the surface to work, I think, is luring a lot of people into believing that software is not as complicated as they have been told, and this is not, in fact, true. So now we need to lure the vibe coders to also, I don't know, vibe specking, vibe PRD. And this is probably in the right direction, but is still not going to suddenly make software like non-chaotic. It is chaotic.
I feel like the most important part that you mentioned there is just like specs are inherently like useful. Planning is useful. Plans are worthless. I love that. But I think if you're going to vibe code and you're going to engineer in this kind of way, right sizing the task, right sizing the spec is essential, because like GPT-5 Pro can get me an incredible plan for the entire thing I want to do, but you will have a terrible time if you paste that entire plan into Codex or Claude Code and just ask it to do it. Like, it's just not going to work. You have to take that and you have to break it down into smaller specs that it can actually handle and have it kind of do that. And that's a very difficult thing. And I feel like that's where a lot of the, like, there are people that are very good at vibe coding and there are people that are just not. And I think most of that, in my opinion, is just like the size of the tasks people are sending these things down on. Because man, if you give it the right size task, the right constraints, tell it what you really want, you can get magic out of these things. But if you ask it to do too much at once, you're going to end up with some spaghetti code that you're going to be hating yourself for down the road. So I feel like right sizing a spec is super important, but I do think spec-driven engineering is a good vibe.
Right sizing and scaffolding. Like everyone who's getting good results right now is getting good at scaffolding and just has a mental model of like where the models tend to get confused. So then you know what guardrails to put around the task.
Totally. And like setting up proper tests or lints in your code base too, so it can make little mistakes, but it can catch those mistakes and it can fix its own mistakes after it's submitted its final information.
Right.
I don't know, kind of interesting. I think another interesting thing too is like anyone who's vibe coding right now, I think it's essential to actually look what context is going in, because I did this just recently where you can add your API key to Cursor and just use your API key, which like if you're paying for Cursor is like kind of ridiculous, because like if you're paying for Cursor, don't use your API key. But if you put your API key in and you only enable API key usage, specifically your OpenAI key, you can go into the platform.openai and you can see the log, you can see the exact system prompts and the context that's going into Cursor. And it's remarkable, because I learned that not only was it getting my Cursor rules, it was getting Cursor rules that I didn't want it to get. It was getting it was also getting a list of all of my open tabs in Cursor. Here's all of the files that are open. And I'm like, I never close my tabs in Cursor. And so gigantic pile of just unrelated files to what it needs to do. And like, that can't do good things to the context window. And so since then, I close out my windows every like hour now, just to make sure everything's cleared out, because now I know I'll open up 3 tabs that I know it should go look at, and I know it's in the prompt. I don't even have to tag it in Cursor. It just knows to go get it. But anyway, put your API key into Cursor CLI or Claude Code or Cursor just to like see exactly what's going into the model, because I completely changed everything I did about my code base and all of my Cursor rules files and all of my agent MDs after seeing how messy of an internal world that coding agents were getting, you know?
That is a great tip. I love that. I'm going to be trying that myself.
One thing that I'm kind of curious about is this evolution of prompting, where before we always usually have to say, think through step by step, explain your thinking, try to encourage it to do the thinking process. Then thinking models came out. If we were to draw parallels to programming languages, where the very first prompting was the assembly language level, do you think we're at the like C level, Python level?
Oh, that's good, because we can go up and down in generality. So here's what I mean. I believe it is the case that software engineering is one of the highest leverage activities on the face of the planet, because over the decades, higher and higher levels of abstraction have been created so that people are just capable of doing more in the same hour, right? We use these libraries and tools that abstract away a tremendous amount of complexity so that we can orchestrate at a higher level. And just like as a species, we haven't found the top end of that abstraction. People are still, they're making frameworks of frameworks of frameworks, and it just keeps working, right? So we just keep increasing the leverageability of our time, at least in software. And so you can see how a lot of the meta prompting and tactics that we're talking about are just like in your metaphor. It's like low level instruction. It's like learning how to use x86 assembly, and at some higher level of abstraction. So in this case, mere C is like a higher level of abstraction and would probably make us more efficient. And then you can imagine frameworks upon frameworks. And so I think that is a good overarching analogy, where you can imagine that the models get more powerful by abstracting away a bunch of the nonsense that we're talking about, and you can treat it like it's a person and it'll give you good output, right? Right now, I'm really holding on to this. You have to be high agency, but maybe the models will just be good enough that you can tacitly assign them agency, and they sort of figure out what you want and do the right thing. It's at least conceivable. Then there's this hidden abstraction that we could also bust through, I think, which is that for the most part, we're training the large language models, even though they are multimodal now, on a lot of language, and language is derived from reality, right? Like this is just the way human beings have chosen to communicate facts about the actual universe as it exists, right? And this is a useful way to train AI, but it isn't how it isn't exclusively how we train babies, right? So we teach each other via words, but also there's a tremendous amount of just direct experiential learning from the universe as it is. And so you can think of that as busting down a layer of abstraction, right? So I actually do expect that our AIs will improve in both directions. So we'll get these higher levels of abstraction that'll empower people to direct them at higher and higher levels with the lower investment, and then hopefully there will be new training breakthroughs that mean that the models themselves are like self-training on actual reality instead of the derived strings that we put on the internet at first.
One thing that kind of just sparked my mind is the idea of multimodal prompting, where on top of the language you give it, do you think, and this is maybe theoretical, maybe practical, do you think that giving a photo or some other type of media along with text prompt will get better results? Because instead of just relying on our abstracted version of reality being language, by introducing imagery or other modalities into the mix, it could kind of steer it in a more accurate direction?
Oh, yeah. I've been employing this in the following way. Lazy prompting featuring graphics or photos. And by lazy, what I mean is I am not describing the thing that I am sharing. I'm leaving it to just stand on its own. And I love seeing, especially OpenAI's reasoning models, like bust out a little bit of Python to do image manipulation on the photo that I just shared in the backyard because I want to know what plant this is. And it's like making its own decisions about where to zoom in on the petal to like figure it out. And that level of let's call it tactical decision making to extract information from the photos is displayed best when I do not try to guide the model, right? Like, so in that place, I'm almost stripping away the scaffolding that I used to do and just, sharing graphics. That's been working well for me.
Anecdotally, this was actually a while ago. It's like a year ago. I was trying to build a pretty complex feature in in one of our systems, and it was very difficult to explain it in words. It's almost one of those things that like you start to explain the thing you're trying to do and you can't really explain it. And the best way to explain it would be to get in front of the whiteboard and just draw it out. And so
Mhm.
I went into Excalidraw and I just like made a workflow essentially, like just
Nice.
drew it out. And that additional context, I think this must have been just GPT-4. This was like a year and a half ago, maybe.
Mhm.
But there was like maybe not right when, but they would start to accept images. And I noticed that I don't know if the code quality was better, but at least understood what I was talking about. It knew the endpoint
Nice.
we were trying to get to, and it wouldn't have gotten there without this like diagram. And I think what's also crazy is like you've probably seen those like Twitter demos where someone will like paste in the most crazy, gross looking diagram you've ever seen. And it's just huge. And it's like those diagrams of like human physiology where like there's different like Krebs cycles and things going on. It's just massive. And it just gets it. It just understands everything that's going on in there. I think that's crazy. Even the amount of words it would take to get to that endpoint of it understanding the system, I think is where multimodality will definitely be impactful. I don't think it's useful for everything, but I think when things that are very complex to describe with words, I think images are awesome for that.
With the current state of models, like if we were to freeze improvement, just have it where it's at, do you feel that the correct prompting would allow AI to solve the problems that AI creates?
I think the answer is yes, but the reason it is yes is because the part of the energy that we're putting into prompting is like co-thinking with the model, right? So I do think even if model improvements froze, there's a lot more leverage we can get out of the things as they currently are in solving coding problems, and even solving a whole bunch of taking action in the real world problems where the solution is co-emergent from human and model kind of having a meeting of the minds, if you will, expressed in the language of context engineering. I think that there's something deep about that is deeply correct if just the reasoning that reasoning models can do now is fully taken advantage of, we can make a bunch of advances across a lot of domain of human problem solving without implicitly. Part of your question is this good enough, or do we need another breakthrough in reasoning, right? And I think we don't. I think mere improvements in almost like the interface of human and machine to collaborate more effectively takes us really far.
Totally agree. I totally agree. I think that like, you know, if you're talking about software at a big company too, like as a developer, you have a role and it's to make code and it's to make code the best you can. But generally you have a QA department to make sure that it's good. So I think I don't know if this is like a multi-agent type of thing, but more of like in my own workflow of asking an agent to go do the creative parts and to make the code and to do the thing, but having a really strong test suite or having really strong lints so that it actually can see what went wrong. And then I have a custom prompt that's just like, go run the lint command and just clean up the mess that was made. I think
Right.
AI can clean up AI's mess, but I think in this current moment, I think it's better to use a fresh context window to clean up a mess rather than the agent that created the mess. But
Right.
yeah.
So prompting can go a long way, maybe not necessarily all a single prompt. And we definitely need to improve the way that the alignment between the human mind and the AI process interface so that we can get to the desired output.
You can find me on X. My handle is Kubla, showing my old hacker lineage, and you can learn more about Fulcra at fulcra.ai.
You can find me on X at Fiero Ty. I post things sometimes, and more to come for me soon.
Thank you for listening to this conversation with Michael Tiffany and Ty Fiero. Prompting is incredibly important. It always will be when interacting with AIs, and it's going to change and evolve. And what we discussed this episode is probably going to be irrelevant a year from now, but I'd really love to get your thoughts. What techniques have you found work well for prompting LLMs? What did we miss? What did we get wrong? We really want to make sure that the collective improves so we can maximize the benefit we get from AI. I want to give a quick shout out to Toolhive for supporting the show so I can have conversations like this, and I'll see you next week.